So we're back and it's another night of tearing this thing down. I got the lower oil pan off last night, and if you see some bits in here, that's because this is what I pulled out. I don't know what this rubber gasket is. This is some kind of O-ring for sure. But this is definitely some connecting rod, piston ring, oil retaining ring. For sure connecting rod, maybe part of a piston, who knows. We'll know for sure once we get this oil pump out and the bed plate comes off. Hopefully we'll be able to do that tonight. I've got my suction tool now so I can empty out all these little pockets so I don't have oil spilling all over my floor again. And then we'll adjust this to get lower here so we can safely take this bed plate off, and then we're going to be able to look at the rotating assembly, get an idea of the condition of the bearings and the crankshaft. After seeing all these bits, I really hope the crank is okay. I was going to have it polished anyway, but if it's too marred up, we'll probably need a replacement, which kind of sucks because we already had to get a replacement block for this project, and we're getting a replacement piston for where all these bits obviously came from. But these are some nice little charms I'm probably going to keep around. Maybe I'll make it, I don't know, maybe put this on a string or something, make something silly with it. But yeah, so this thing definitely blew up. But we'll see if we can't get this thing running. We'll fix this oil pump right up, make sure there's no bits stuck in there, but we're gonna get to work. Okay, update on this complete show. Oil pump has been removed, timing chain guides, timing chain cover. We flipped the engine upside down, but the most difficult thing we've had to do is actually use the jack, pick it up here on this block, and I had to move. I had these studs from the lift on here, and here. And the reason I've had to move it to the bottom one is because this whole part is gonna come off right now once the bed plate is removed, and then we'll have access to the rotating assembly. That was a little difficult, balancing it on here, getting all these nuts set up with one hand. And then obviously the jack doesn't go that high, so I had to pick this whole thing up and slide it onto here. Not one of the most difficult things I've ever done, but definitely tricky enough, and you really don't want to lose the toe. But all these main bolts have been untorqued. Now all these other ones on the outside and these little ones in here are going to come out. Those are all going to get zipped out, and then we're going to pull the bed plate, and we're going to see what carnage and where all this junk exactly came from. So this has been pretty fun so far, but let's see you in a minute once all this is out of the way. So here we have it, bed plate off, and you can see a little bit of carnage, all that little pitting from that metal just thrashing around. This piston is probably totally done, but I still can't see exactly where those bits came from. Got a little bit of movement to it, but I think that's normal. Nothing immediate we can see. There is some pitting on the other side of the crank. I'm worried if the crank might not be bad now, but who knows? Let's see. The thing was shaking pretty bad as it was running, and this piston's pretty pitted up too, but we'll see if we can't get these out and drop this piston out and see how it looks or where those pieces actually came from. Because there's a bunch of metal in the oil pan, you know, we got it out, but let's tear this bad boy down and see what is what exactly. So here we are again. We got hung up a little bit yesterday because I didn't have the proper socket to unbolt this. I got it off now because I went and bought it, but interesting enough because this is called a triple square. Pretty interesting bit, or 12 point. Germans call it a triple square. And the place that had a 12 point socket was, funny enough, AutoZone, and it actually got these two undone. Now these two are damaged cylinders, as we can see from down here. All this marring and stuff on the piston. So today we're gonna dig in a little bit. Look at all these pieces, how they was just all those rough spots. Wow. All over the piston, you can see it. I don't know if this camera would focus. Yeah, so needless to say, these two pistons are gonna be replaced. Hopefully the crank can be saved with some maybe micro polishing to take the very edge off, because this is hardened steel. It's a forged crankshaft from the factory, which is pretty cool. And looking inside, you can actually see a stamp. Let's see if we can get this thing to show right here. Yeah, factory Molly pistons in the M156. So if people were wondering why Mercedes engines are so expensive, especially AMGs. Forged crank, forged pistons from the factory. You can even see that little ceramic coating, that black on the outside, the skirt of the piston. So this is pretty cool. So we're going to see about dropping these things today without destroying everything. Doesn't matter if we damage this block. This thing's pretty much toast, other than, unless there's like maybe a hole in the cylinder. It's not hopelessly deformed. This thing probably could be reused if it was going to be a sleeved block or something. Not by me, obviously, but I'm going just for that stock rebuild. So we're going to drop these things out and take a look at them. Okay, so we found it. Piston exploded. Holy moly, look at that. Wow. This thing is so toast. So all these bits and bobs, look, even more ring. This ring just fell off. There's the oiling ring that belonged to this thing. This skirt part of the piston. Well, this is the skirt, but here's some more damaged. Wow. So this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what we got. Wow, this thing's toast. So yeah, let's say this is the bad piston. Hopefully the crank is savable. The rod is not too bad. The rod bearing, seen better days. This thing's gonna get new rod bearings anyway. Hopefully the crank is still good. But yeah, so this is what caused this engine to fail. This thing had the piston just quit. Wow, that's actually a divot for the valve. Now this thing was shaking super bad. These pistons and these rods are balanced. They all weigh, I think, within like grams of the same thing, and it keeps the engine on balance. 8 cylinders is one of the smoother running engines. 12 cylinders runs the smoothest because they're self-balancing. But it looks like this thing just quit and it sent a bunch of shards. That's why this chamber right here, and by chamber I mean this area where both these pistons are. Now they're all separated by the bed plate, because the bed plate uses these cam caps all in one thing. So these are all 4 separate chambers. So if you get damage to one, it won't damage the rest of them. So essentially the pistons are reusable. This engine is been designed more like a race engine. It's easy to time. It's pretty easy to actually put together and everything. So this thing was probably designed so if you had a failure like this, you could reuse the other pistons, and probably reuse the crank. If we can, because it's got a couple little Mars in it. Hopefully it's good, but we'll start dropping out these pistons one by one, and then we'll get the crankshaft out, and then this block will pretty much be scrapped. A new one's going to go on here, and then we're going to order new parts, and this thing's going to start going back together. But this is going to most likely be going to a machine shop. The journals right here look very good. Mine just dirt off of my glove. Journals look good and everything. The rod bearings, actually, the main bearings looked very good. We're just going to see if we can't get a micro polish just for this mishap over here, for all this debris. You see all the oil squirter down there. These things actually spray the bottom of the piston as they go up. And it looks like, no, I thought it was different, but this one over here is solid. So crank's going to have to be polished, but all these pistons are going to be dropped out, and then they're going to be put back in the same order. So I'm just going to clear out my table, and we'll get to work on this thing right now. And you'll see this M156 fully stripped and on the table. Now, before we tear everything down, I thought I'd show you guys something cool. The way these are assembled. Now, this is a perfect round. See? Now, you might have noticed this line right here is actually cracked. That's because that's the way these things are made. These are actually cast as one piece and then cracked in half. And that way they ensure once they're threaded right here at the bottom. And that's how we ensure that these things seal and become totally round. So once these go on these crank journals, there's full contact all the way around, and it doesn't rock up and down. Because if these were made as 2 separate pieces and then just put back together, these are made as 2 separate pieces and then put back together, there would be a slight oval shape from this gap here. There's no way we could get it as a perfect round. This is the only way to do it. So this is how they do it. It's pretty interesting. It looks wrong in person once you see it. I've always heard that people do this, but that's pretty much the best way to get these things perfectly round, so they seat around the crank journal and don't rock up and down. So there we have it. The M156 is now completely apart. Cylinder heads, lower oil pan, chains, pulleys, the crankshaft, and the pistons. Now these are pistons 5 and 1, and these things are pretty marred up. I'll actually show you what happened, why this thing was so off balance. Take a look at that. Forged piston totally collapsed. And these things are all weighed and balanced and whatnot, so they all weigh the same. So the rotating inertia is similar, so it balances itself out. But this thing's so trashed that it was just throwing it off, and this engine was just all over the place. This thing was shaking so bad. Here was the cylinder. Now, it's not as bent as I thought it was, but we've got a mar right here in the alusil coating. Now, this, I think, yeah, I can feel the rough part. This should be totally smooth. And plus there's marks up here that we don't have on the other cylinders. So this block is, I wouldn't say trashed. It's a good candidate if someone wants to sleeve a block, so I'll keep it for now. I've got another block that's totally trashed that we're gonna make another project with once the S63 is running. So that's coming soon. So I've got 3 M156 blocks at my house right now, but so far the engine has been completely torn down. Next step, this one's gonna be put away. The heads and everything, this is gonna get cleaned. That's all gonna get cleaned up. Faceplate's gonna get cleaned. Crankshaft, we've got to find a machine shop that's able to do a polish job on this thing. Although you can't feel this mark right here, I'd prefer if this was just polished, all the journals were polished. The rod bearings aren't in that bad a shape. They're no BMW for sure, but they are gonna get replaced anyway. The 2 little thrust bearings that go on the journal for cylinders 4 and I believe it's 7, or 4 and 8, whatever. It's this 3rd row where the thrust bearings were going. The plate seems decent. That's gonna get all cleaned up really well. Let me see what we're gonna do with this. The faceplate's gonna get cleaned up. Now maybe I might paint these outside surfaces just so I can have like a pretty engine to put back in, but we'll just see how well these things clean up. The oil pump I just opened up, things actually got rotors like a supercharger in here. It's pretty neat. That's actually in good shape. There was some debris in this pickup tube, and thank goodness there's a mesh down in here that caught everything. So the pump seems to be okay, so we don't need to shell out a few $100s for that. But the M156 is fully disassembled now, and the next part of this project is cleaning. Now here are the parts that were on the outside. I'm gonna clean up all these other things, all these tubes and whatnot. The headers are actually gonna go to Fluid Motoring Union. I sent them a few photos. They said they can take care of them. So those are gonna get vapor honed. Those are gonna look brand new when we put the engine back. And then we'll get to cleaning up the engine bay. Probably see if we can't replace some of this aluminum or repaint some of this stuff so it looks decent once this all goes back together. I already cleaned up a little bit in here. It was all full of debris. I just brake cleaned it down and vacuumed everything. So I want to get all the junk and crud out of here. So once this thing goes back in, you can stick your hand in here without it coming out black just from all the dirt and grit. Bolts for those. Steering rack, I gotta put those back in place. Try to clean up this exhaust a little bit. But the S63 project is going decently. It's all apart. That next time you see this, the new block is gonna be on here, but that'll be in a little bit. I'm actually gonna take a little bit of time. I'm gonna get this machine, this machine shop, and looks like I'm gonna need 2 replacement pistons because all that debris was just no good for any of this. Everything was just flying around. It beat up the crank a little bit on the outside. But the good thing is all these chambers are sealed, so it's only this front part of the crankshaft. I'd really hate to have to need a new crank, but you know, it is what it is. Thanks.